Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today, we are here with Laura Beck, Project and Policy Analyst, Consumer Protection Division, City of Seattle. She serves as the liaison for the Joint Education and Enforcement Team.
Hey, Laura, great to see you, and thank you for taking the time today to go over the great work that you're doing in Seattle. Before we begin, why don't you just give a brief statement about your background, how you got to be what you're doing now?
It's good to see you too as well, Jim. Thanks for inviting me to chat. So initially what brought me to Seattle was actually the nightclubs and the venues and the all ages dance clubs in Seattle. It's been about 30 years since I've been here, which kind of ages me a little bit there. But it's given me the opportunity to really experience the ever-changing art and music and nightlife venues that happen at nighttime in our city. My background is really in social service, regulatory enforcement, policy, and consumer protection. So those are kind of unique skill sets, but it allows me to work with the community on more of a social service level and more of being able to explain detailed policy, regulations, and laws with the community. Because my goal is really to invite the industry and community members to get them together to share kind of the successes that they've had amongst themselves and also look for solutions to the challenges that they have when looking to create a safe and inclusive and thriving nightlife environment.
Now, I know that the kind of this alliance or team that you put together, I know it has different names. I know the Joint Enforcement Team and then the Public Safety Alliance, or it has different terms. So can you kind of, first of all, help me to clarify the term that you use, and then a little bit about what factors contributed to forming the alliance, which seems to be what would bring all your different skill sets together as being important.
So what we go by as the team is we call ourselves the Joint Enforcement Team, or or for the acronym for it is JET. And basically the concept of having interdepartmental coordination really began back in 2005. Um, the the city had heard some concerns from nightlife businesses about being having visits from different departments and different agencies on different nights, and it was really disruptive and confusing for them and their patrons kind of having these interruptions at night. And it was also really time consuming for the owners of the businesses. So the jet team was created basically to consolidate these visits and coordinate with different city departments, state agencies, and county agencies to go as a group when we visit a business during their nighttime activities, which is the busiest time that they're there. Um, so that's really how it formed and when it started. There has been many different names to the group, but right now it is considered the Joint Enforcement or the Joint Education and Enforcement Team.
Mhm. Okay. And how is it structured, and who are the members, and how do they get appointed?
So the structure of the joint team, it's made up of members of the following departments, and I'll kind of explain what they do a little bit later. But involved in is Seattle Police Department, the Seattle Fire Department, Finance Administrative Services, which is Consumer Protection, the Seattle Department of Transportation, Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, and Public Health of Seattle King County, and sometimes from other departments as needed in the city, such as the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection. Um, those groups joined the JET team as they see fit. We have standard operating procedures for each department as to what the purpose of their membership is, what they do on jet outings, and those types of things. The staffing for each of their departments is decided by the individual departments themselves. As far as facilitating JET, it's co-facilitated by 3 staff members from Seattle Police Department and FAS Consumer Protection. So we have one lieutenant from Seattle Police and a deputy director from Consumer Protection and myself who co-facilitate. Um, Basically, we schedule and lead code compliance meetings with the members from all the departments of JET We call them code compliance teams. And we also facilitate and organize the logistics, the agenda, the staffing attendance, and taking notes on the visits and the outcomes from the JET outings. So it's kind of a mixture of field work and policy partnership between all those departments and agencies.
Yeah, no, I remember learning about this, that there's kind of this synchronicity between the field team, the people who actually go out, do the inspections, work with the venue
Mhm.
operators, and they begin to identify some issues or concerns, and then that goes up to another level of the city. Can you explain how that works?
Sure. I would say so things that come into the JET's kind of purview or area come from all the different departments, either complaints or concerns that we've heard from consumers or businesses. But we have what we call the code compliance team, the general team, and the policy team. The general team is made of the actual staff members who go out in the field, and we discuss businesses and concerns and issues that we would like to address further in person in the nightlife and nighttime industry. We strategize to which ones and kind of prioritize which ones we think we would like to see and what we could do collaboratively to work with them to get them into compliance or to provide them with information. Those suggestions then go up to the code compliance policy team, which are the high level decision makers, such as deputies and directors of those departments and agencies, who kind of have the final say as to what staff and what resources they can put towards the goals and the visits that we'd like to do. And then the facilitators basically take those items and prioritize them on the JET outings that we do. Usually we like to try to go out in the field about twice a month, if not 4 times. In the summertime, we're a little busier than in the winter.
So, to what extent or how do you engage the businesses? I mean, this seems like a principally government organization. But I mean, how do the businesses see it? I mean, it seems to me that with such diversity and comprehensive kind of code enforcement regulatory people, if I was a business operator and you came into my space with all of those different people, I'd be like, oh my God, what am I in for? You know, I
Right.
mean, it seems kind of intimidating. And how do the businesses react to this kind of joint team, which seems almost like a SWAT team approach?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we've learned. So basically the main priority of JET is, to inspect the clubs and the bars and the street vendors for compliance for all types of things. And so when we initially started going out as JET, it was only a team, I think, of about 3 departments. And now, obviously, as we talked about, it's grown into probably about 7 to 8 departments. So it can be a large number of people that are going out. And what we found is one of the lessons that we've learned is when we go into an establishment, we try to narrow the focus of people actually going in. When we create our agenda and we have these code compliance team meetings, we talk about who might be the lead agency, who has either an issue or a need to go into that business. And so we try to limit as much as possible the number of people that are actually walking into an establishment. The remaining staff usually stay out on the street, talk to the public, address concerns, educate people in general on what JET is and what we do. The other part of that we have learned, it's kind of skipping forward to the best practices, is we've learned to be a little more proactive of going out to businesses when it's not their busy time, not during a Saturday night at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, but waiting with those newer businesses and even existing businesses as management changes to let them know who we are, how they can get a hold of us, what our purpose is. And that has seemed to help a little bit with kind of that overwhelming enforcement type of feeling that they were having originally when JET began.
Well, a lot of people who get into this industry often don't have a lot of experience. Maybe they have experience as a chef, or they have experience as a bartender, and they raise enough money, they get an inheritance and they decide, well, I'm going to open up a restaurant or I'm going to open up
Mm-hmm.
a bar. And
Mm-hmm.
then they start to get into it, and just the whole process of getting the permits and the licenses and compliance and all this other stuff. How do you help those new businesses get oriented, considering that they're more likely to fail within the first year if they haven't been prepared and
Mhm.
know what their responsibilities are?
Well, and that's a great point. I think when businesses do open, they can start at different points of a regulatory compliance. They might start with building and construction. They might start with the liquor control board. And there's having this coalition together, we're able to say, have you also checked with, have you checked these other things off your list of the types of things that you might need to do? Because there is not really one cohesive area that says you need to do steps A, B, and C to open up a club or a bar or a restaurant in Seattle. However, that we do have a department that has created a nightlife handbook that has been really helpful when we can get people directed to it, letting them know it's available either to start a new business or expand their business, that goes through the requirements and the steps and things to think about. And it provides like direct contacts for those businesses to ask questions ahead of time and hopefully get things set up successfully before they open. But a lot of the JET team is, even though it's the joint enforcement team, we really try to lead with education first. Our goal isn't to go out and shut down a business and close them up and really jam them up in what they're trying to do. The only time we will take immediate enforcement action is as if it's a life and safety issue. And that usually revolves around a fire issue, code compliance type of thing. But usually a lot of it is education. It's getting them to the right resources. It's explaining what steps they need to take to get into compliance and to basically create a safe environment for them and their patrons.
Now, you mentioned before about vendors. So because we have a session about the various code compliance around mobile vendors, whether they be sidewalk vendors or food trucks or food
Mhm.
carts, that this seems to be an evolving cultural trend, where people are really excited about the diversity of food, particularly the diversity of ethnic food that you could get from food trucks. And, it's kind of a social experience. It's something that people are doing more of. But, in many cases, we've heard where these vendors kind of take over space, they intrude on space, particularly at night in the nightlife districts, which create congestion or conflicts, or in Denver's case, there's been some shootings around food trucks and people waiting to get food served to them, so does, you mentioned this team also focuses on that segment of the kind of the public's dining experience.
Mhm. One of the things with street vending is when you were talking about the costs and the preparing for a business, a lot of people see that as a less expensive way to get into the industry, to get things started, to get people to know about their food or what they're doing. So one of the things in Seattle, not as much with food trucks. Food trucks are really regulated and seem to be a little more organized, but the street vending, like hot dog vendors and tacos and those types of things, we have encountered an uptick in Seattle of those types of businesses that have set up a cart or a table in public areas, especially nightlife areas that are very busy. So, what's really nice about this group is we can go out and talk to those people about what those requirements are, what they need to have. And most of the time, for those types of businesses, we start with the Seattle Department, or excuse me, SDOT, Seattle Department of Transportation, which has to do with the permitting for food vendors, street use, sidewalk use. And then it's used in the combination of the public health of King County, because they really look at the food safety programs that protect people from foodborne illnesses. Um, so they're inspecting the businesses for regarding complaints, permits, compliance, and seeing if they can be able to, if there is a path for them to legally be able to operate in the area that they want. The other concern with the vendors is a lot of times there's open flame grills and barbecues and those types of things. So it really becomes a fire issue as well.
Mhm.
So the fire department then will also have discussions with those vendors. We've made it, we've really transitioned into providing information and even conversations, having a translation service available to us, and also to be able to provide training classes and written information in some of the primary languages that we're seeing for our vendors out in the neighborhoods, which has been beneficial. But it is a growing area of non-compliance, especially around stadiums and large venues.
Mhm, mhm. This is very interesting, and it seems like you've have a lot of lessons that you've learned over the years, and it seems like you take a very proactive, preventive approach. But what I also hear, it seems to me, maybe an outcome, maybe an unintended outcome, is, you know, typically a police officer will go through the academy, but may never really learn about some of the codes associated with sound or fire and occupancy or building construction. So do you see that this kind of interagency team is actually educating and training everybody else in terms of what each different department does and what their department is capable of doing? And really, it's almost like a training of the people who are participating in this are learning as much as the businesses are.
Absolutely. I think it's, we may be aware of the fire department and a little bit about what they do, but it goes along kind of with the consistency of the team. Having people that are on this team understand that when we're on this team, our roles might be a little different than it might be in our normal daily lives. An example you brought up for the police department. The police department is mainly with us for security of ourselves, for security out on the street, and also to make those connections with the security at the clubs and the management, just kind of put a face on things. But as we learn more about each department when they go into businesses, and we take these notes, and we do briefings after the outing and also at the CCT meetings to really kind of hone in on what specific things might be required should somebody ask me about, let's just say, a fire code. I might have a little more general information about it, but I think the most important thing is I have that connection with somebody specifically, not just the fire department to refer them to, but I have an actual person that I can say, hey, this lieutenant can help answer your questions. Here's his number, here's his email, here's his contact. He's familiar with what Jet does. He'll have information on any visits that we've had to your business, and to really kind of collaborate that way with the businesses and the different departments that all together.
Well, this is very informative, and I've actually covered all the questions without me, excuse me, asking them. But what would you say that if somebody in another city were to consider doing something like this? What would you recommend, and how would you say they begin to approach this? Because clearly, if you started this in 2005, you have 20 years of
Yeah, it's been a lot of
trial and
learning.
error. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
learning. But how would you communicate like the top three things that somebody should consider in setting something like this up?
I think that one of the top things is basically making initial contacts with businesses, and talking to them and educating them about what the city or the state is requiring prior to actually making a late night visit is super important. It gets that bond and that connection and the less kind of a threatening type of introduction to us and to that business. We can understand what they're struggling with, and they can understand what we're looking for in compliance. And so part of that is the stable membership of the team members that go out. It's nice to see, you may not have the exact same inspector, but you might have the same 5 inspectors from a department that go out on a jet. And for businesses to see familiar faces, and people that they have talked to in the past, and they don't have to retell their story, has definitely been beneficial. But one of the things with that is to really have the consistency of that. So succession planning in your staffing for retirements, people transferred to other departments, really having those new people understand what our goals are, which is kind of education first and enforcement second, which a lot of times is a different kind of concept for what we do in our daily, maybe our daily work. One of the other thing that I would say is transparency. there's nothing worse than people having a misconception of what you're there for and why your team is there. So different forms, like we have a website that provides not only information about who Jet is, but what the team members are. It also provides additional resources for people in the nightlife industry. So it's one place that all of our departments can kind of send people to email us directly, to give contact numbers. It also has links to useful information about the nightlife safety training that we provide to security personnel and managers of nightclubs, as well as there's a nightlife establishment handbook that's available to help businesses that are with tools and contacts and resources about that process we talked about when you're either starting or expanding your business. And I think one of the other things that is important to focus on is making sure that the team understands what their goal is. And so for Jet, our focus is on safety, and education and getting compliance. So for larger issues, that thing might be more political or just very complex, we try to remind ourselves that we are there as the connection between our agencies and the industry. So we may go out and visit and follow up on an incident. Let's say there was some violence or some criminal activity outside of clubs or inside of clubs. Jet doesn't actually resolve those problems as a team, but what we do is we go out, make connections, talk to the businesses, make observations, and then provide that information to the specific agencies and departments that would be involved in creating a solution, a larger solution, and following up. And so that works into the CCT teams, but really not being overwhelmed by all the different types of things that need to be addressed in a nightlife community or in a city, knowing what the goals of the team are, I think help to really make something like this successful.
This is terrific. You've done a great job of really explaining a very complex system in an easy to understand and digest way. So I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been a great interview, and I look forward to seeing you and having you share your experience at the summit.
Look forward to it as well. Thanks so much, Jim.
Okay.
All right.